want to stay on this story. Our Chase team has reached Catherine McKenna. You know that name. She's Canada's former Minister of Environment and Climate Change, and she joins me live from Toronto. Catherine, always great to pick your brain on something you used to know, be right in the middle of. And I want to take you back to 2015, to COP21, when you were in favor as well of holding the global warming limit to 1.5 degrees Celsius. And here we are. It's 2021, and it's still the same goal. What does that tell you? Are we spinning our wheels?
Look, I mean, in some ways, I don't mean to laugh, but there's always this flurry at the end of COPs to try to get deals. And they really matter because, in a way, the Paris Agreement in 2015 that we negotiated, I mean, that's the framework. We've got a clear target in terms of temperatures, and then countries really have to go do the hard work themselves. So a lot of focus on language I've seen, like, are we going to commit to early acceleration off coal? Well, that's up to countries to do. I mean, we certainly want countries to agree with that theory or that sentiment, but we need them to do it themselves. But there are some really important points in the negotiations. One, you don't want to water down commitments. And I know there was some concern about the 1.5 degree target. And you know what? There's always, I'm going to say it, bad guys in these negotiations. There's the High Ambition Coalition, folks who want to do more. And I would certainly put Canada in this context. We've been pushing really hard and some really concrete actions we've taken. But there's a Low Ambition Coalition too. So you got to fight an end game so they don't weaken the text. And when you have 196 countries sitting around the table, that's hard. But the market text is really important. And it's a bit complicated, but essentially it's that for countries that exceed their target, they could, there could be a market where they could have emissions that are traded with countries that aren't going to meet their target because, it's just very challenging. But if you do this system, and you do not have integrity, you could have both countries counting the emissions. So that's called double counting, but it's terrible for the planet. Or you could have emissions, folks could say, well, I planted a few trees. You can get a bunch of credits for that, and there's no integrity. So I will be watching extremely closely. This is what I was involved in negotiating in COP21. Because if we get bad rules, they are worse than getting no rules at all. And I don't love that sometimes in these negotiations, everyone's just like, got a deal. We'll all just, clap and it'll be amazing. Actually, you got to do the work and you have to have serious rules and you have to hold folks to account. So I'm going to be paying attention to that. But in the end, look, COP26 is a moment in time. I think it was very important. The world is paying attention. But now everyone's got to go do the work. Because even when people say we're at 4 degrees, which is certainly a lot better than the more than 6 degrees we were at COP21, that doesn't mean that folks actually have policies in place. Now, Canada is very disciplined. We show every year how we're going to meet our targets if there's a gap. But other countries need to actually have the measures in place to do that. And that includes countries like the United States or countries like Australia. They're still burning coal,
right,
and exporting a ton of coal. So anyway, I'll be certainly watching closely, mainly to make sure we aren't weakening what we agreed to. But then we got to go, everyone's got to go home, and enough talk, enough new announcements, just do the work.
Yeah, you say enough talk, and you talked about the high ambition, low ambition of the coalition. So there's then there's the COP26 coalition of activists who say, and Greta Thunberg earlier this week described the summit as a 2-week-long celebration of business as usual and blah, blah, blah. The blah, 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 is that really what's happening right now as we get to these final countdown hours, hour, if you will? And then, as you say, what we're going to have to see is the action, not the language afterwards. But how important is the blah, blah that's happening now?
Well, I've sat at tables and I think blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, it is a thing. But I don't, look, Greta and all these activists have such an important role. They shine a light on what is going on. They talk about the very real impacts on people, about climate justice, intergenerational justice, impacts on Indigenous peoples, on the most marginalized. But at the end of the day, it does matter. These negotiations, the rules matter, and there's been a lot of progress. And the only thing I worry about is that if you become so cynical, you almost become nihilistic. And let me tell you, the bad guys, they're pretty happy about that, right? They'd rather us do nothing. And I will include some fossil fuel companies in that for sure, and some countries. So I think that seeing, there's a focus by the world, they're negotiating text, they're trying to get rules on Article 6, markets and other pieces. and making sure there's no what they call backsliding, no going back, I think is important. And I'm an optimistic realist, sometimes a realistic optimist, depends on the days, but we can do this. We can actually tackle climate change, but it's not just going to be at a COP26, it's going to be everyone doing the work.
All right.
And so that's what we got to be hopeful. We have to do it. I have 3 kids, and I tell them every day I will work as hard as I can to do what I can to help tackle climate change. And that's what we all need to be doing, including countries that are sitting around that table.
Thanks for that, Catherine. You be well. That is Catherine McKenna in Toronto, Canada's former Minister of Environment and Climate Change.